Om Parthaya Pradibodhidam Bhagavata Narayanena Swayam Vyasena Gradidam Purana Munina Madhye Mahabharatam Advaidam Radavarshinim Bhagavatim Ashtadashadhyayinim Ambatva Manusandadhami Bhagavad Gita Bhavadveshinim Yam Brahma Varunendra Rudramarudastunyandi Divyaistavaihi Vedai Sangapadakramopaniषदे Gayanti Yam Samagaha Dhyanavastita Tadgatena Manasa Pashyanti Yam Yogino Yasyandam Navidusura Suraganaha Devaya Tasmai Namaha. We were discussing the first two, three verses of the 10th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. And today I'm very happy because we are resuming these in-person sessions, and as a coincidence, today happens to be the birthday of the great Swami who built this temple in the year 1905, Swami Tattwamayananda. Today is the birthday. He was born the year 1863, the same year in which Swamiji was born. Passed away in 1915. So, we were discussing, I think, the first two verses. The third verse we just started. Yo mam ajam anadimcha veti lokamaheshwaram asammudhasamarteshu sarvapapai pramuchyate. So we remember, this particular chapter is called Vibhuti Yoga. Vibhuti means the manifestation, the power of manifestation. So according to Hindu philosophy, Vedanta philosophy, the absolute reality has two dimensions. The unmanifested is called the impersonal, and the manifested, the personal. So, the absolute reality is, in its pristine nature, is impersonal. Impersonal doesn't mean, as frequently misinterpreted, it doesn't mean having no personality. It means going beyond the personal dimension. If you say that God has this definite form, this is the shape and the form of God, these are certain characteristics of God, this book contains all the wisdom about God, actually it is a blasphemy, because you are limiting the limitless. You are bringing to the finite level what is essentially infinite. But at the same time, the infinite can have a finite manifestation. So Sri Ramakrishna, in his own characteristic way, used to say, so think of a snake. A snake, when it is coiled up, it doesn't move. It just stays there. But it has the potential to move. Now it is unmanifest. It doesn't show any external characteristics. But the same snake can move. When it is moving, it is the manifest or manifested stage. And when it is not moving in its coiled up form, it is the unmanifest stage. So now, another interesting aspect that comes from this chapter is, Lord Krishna says, in the coming verses he will say, everything in this world has got one origin. Not only all the good things, all the bad things also. So that's something, the good, bad and the indifferent, all have the same source. So they all come from the same source. So it's something like, let us say, to give a simple every example is only an approximation, it cannot be perfect, equivalent. Electricity, it manifests in so many ways, depending upon the gadget through which it manifests. It can be used for getting light, it can be used for generating heat. It has got so many different types of manifestations. Like that, everything in this world is different manifestations of the same reality. Now, if you say, for example, now this can actually create some doubts. In the coming chapters, we will discuss. So I want to create a background. Suppose a bad person, let's say the terrible persons in history we read about, we talk about, who have been scourges of humanity. How do you describe that person as a manifestation of the divine? This is a big question. Then you will be denying the reality. You will be denying the reality of evil. Now, Vedanta doesn't recognize two entities. It says there is only one absolute reality. Depending upon the structure of our mind, our emotional structure, our emotions and feelings, what we call samskaras, that's a word used by Patanjali. It is used in Buddhist tradition. It is used in Vedantic tradition. Samskaras are certain tendencies, certain essential characteristics of mind, thoughts, emotions and feelings. Depending upon them, the divine manifests or the divine expresses itself as evil. See the light, depending upon the gadget, electricity manifests as light. It can be helpful. It manifests as heat. Heat also can be a problem, but heat can also be a blessing in cold regions. In extremely hot places, heat is a problem. So, the point, depending upon the gadgets, so all human beings go through this evolution of samskaras. That's the only word that can be used, because samskaras cannot actually be translated into English language. So many of the books written on yoga, psychology, or even in mainstream psychology, they often they write this word samskara, is A-M-S-K-R-A, means samskara means tendencies, certain inborn tendencies that prompt us to do certain things in a certain manner, and we can't help it. It depends upon what we are born with. We can change our samskaras by doing good actions. You can refine, you can sublimate your samskaras. We can become more and more pure. Our samskaras become more and more refined, pure, when we do good deeds, when we speak good things, when we do something that generates spiritual energy, then we generate healthy or good samskaras, spiritually healthy samskaras. So depending upon the constitution of our samskaras, we behave, we speak, we act, and we live. So this is the explanation. So that's a very important thing to remember when we are going through the coming verses. The third verse is this one. You see. Yo mam ajam anadimcha veti lokamaheshwaram asammuda samarteshu sarvapapai pramuchyate. This verse tells us that the absolute reality is ajam. Ajam means birthless. Again, it doesn't mean that it doesn't take birth. It cannot be defined as something that takes birth in a particular fashion. So there are two ways to understand this. The wrong way to understand, suppose somebody tells, the word nirguna is there in Sanskrit. It is used in Buddhist philosophy also. Nirguna, the word is it. Nirguna doesn't really mean devoid of gunas. Guna means characteristics, properties, certain qualities. This is guna. So nirguna actually means gunatida. Atida means going beyond. Something that cannot be defined in terms of certain characteristics. You can define a flower as white flower or red flower or green flower or anything. You can define a person, he is a journalist or he is a doctor, he is an engineer and so on. Or you can define him as, let us say, brother, sister and so on. You can define a person depending upon his relationship, depending upon his characteristics, depending upon what he does. So it's called the Panja Shabda Pravritti, means 5 types of characteristics based on which we define, we describe certain things. I mean, jati, guna, karma, sambandha, etc., dravya, etc. Things that help us to define, and define means limiting. When we define something, we are putting a limit to something. So Lord Krishna says the absolute reality cannot be defined or cannot be explained completely. You cannot exhaust that nature of the divine. The divine is infinite. It transcends all possibilities of descriptions, definitions, verbalizations. It is neither born, at the same time it's neither dead. It's ajam anadim. It has no beginning, it has no end. So these are called 6 changes. These are certain very important aspects of Vedanta philosophy. In fact, many of these ideas you find in the Buddhist philosophy, in the Vijnanavada and Shunyavada, Nagarjuna's Shunyavada, and of course Asanga's Vasubandhu and others, Vijnanavada, which actually mindfulness is just a small, let's say, offspring of this Vijnanavada philosophy. The absolute reality is beyond birth, beyond growth, beyond existence, beyond evolution, beyond decay, beyond death. It's called Sadvikara Atida, going beyond the 6 changes. Something which doesn't take birth, so it is birthless. That's what Ajam means. Why? Because it always exists. It doesn't come into existence because it always exists. And again, it doesn't go through any kind of changes like growth, evolution, decay, and of course it is deathless. So it is the absolute. This is the true nature of God in his highest dimension. Somebody may ask this question, how can we understand such a God? This is a big problem. The answer is, depending upon our own evolution, we define and we understand the absolute reality. When we evolve in spiritual life, then we won't be satisfied if somebody tells us, well, this is God's name, this is the only road leading to God, this is the place where he lives, this is the book that contains all the wisdom of that God. Nothing more, nothing less. What about other books? No, this is only the thing. So, now this is not wrong according to Vedanta, but this is only kindergarten, primary school, lower primary school. It is not wrong. It is only the beginning. As we evolve in spiritual life, then we realize the fact that the divine God exists. He manifests outside the temple, outside the church, outside the place of worship. Even if you live a good, pure life without ever going to a place of worship, without even affirming the reality of a created God, if you live a pure life, you can reach God. A Buddha is an example for this. So that's why this 3rd verse tells us that those who understand me as birthless, beginningless, and infinite, deathless. They are the greatest and they are the wisest, and they understand me. This is the meaning of the third verse. After that, we will go to the fifth verse. In the fifth and sixth verses, Lord Krishna is giving 20 different characteristics or emotions that we can find in this world among human beings. And he says, in all these characteristics, you can see the divine presence. In the mighty ocean, in the beautiful clouds, the sky, the mountains, all these are different manifestations of the divine at one level. At the same time, great human qualities, compassion, kindness, knowledge, wisdom, self-restraint, self-control, tolerance. These are all also different manifestations of the divine. Without the presence of the divine, one cannot be wise, intelligent, self-restrained, all that. So you can find 20 qualities are explained here. Buddhir jnanam asammoha kshama satyam dama shama sukham dukkham bhavo abhavo bhayam cha abhayameva cha ahimsa samada tushtis tabo danam yasho ayashaha bhavanti bhava bhudana matta eva pruthak vidhaha. So what is it? These are all different kinds of qualities and characteristics that emerge, that rise from me. Here the word is in the first person. Me here doesn't mean a personal creator idea of God. It is not wrong, but going beyond that, it means one single divine reality. And different prophets, different spiritual teachers, different founders of religions are all higher manifestations of this divine. In fact, the more and more you manifest these divine qualities within us, the more and more we represent, then more and more we actually become symbols of this divine reality. So the qualities given here, for example, buddhi, intellect, higher intellectual power, that is also a manifestation of the divine, of the same reality. Yeah, and again, jnana means knowledge. Here, knowledge, it means the ability, the discerning wisdom. Not only intellectual understanding, but also the discerning wisdom. That is the real meaning of jnanam. So jnanam includes knowledge, understanding, information. But jnanam also includes the ability to make proper use of what we know. And that is very important. Otherwise, it will be very, very superficial. How can information or knowledge be a manifestation of the divine? If we find in a person tremendous knowledge, but also politeness, humility, and self-restraint, and to use that knowledge properly, then you can see the presence of the divine. Otherwise, a computer which knows a book, encyclopedia, it cannot be a manifestation of the divine. But if a person has got knowledge, and also he has the wisdom to make proper use of that knowledge, to manage his knowledge, his resources, intellectual resources, then it is a manifestation of the divine. And then asammoha. Asammoha means total freedom from confusion, delusion, an ability to see into the reality of things with a sense of unerring wisdom. People may have intellectual powers, high IQ, but terribly confused. Mind is always agitated, no peace of mind, all kinds of doubts and confusions, and there you don't see the divine. But a person who has the knowledge, wisdom, and also the ability to see things. You can imagine, well, there are many examples, but I give examples from great manifestations of the divine, not from among saints and mystics, because that's taken for granted, even among those who worked in the world of politics, industry, commerce, or even among scientists, for example, material scientists who may not have gone to a church or a temple once in their life. But if you find among them great knowledge, great expertise, great scientists, but also the ability to understand the limitation of science. Einstein seems to be one example. Einstein and some of the early generation of great nuclear physicists who actually migrated to America. You can find it. One of them actually was a regular reader of the Bhagavad Gita. In fact, one who actually came from Germany. Now, a great scientist who has tremendous intellectual power, but also the ability or the discerning wisdom to understand that science cannot explain everything. There are things which modern science cannot explain. There you can see the presence of the divine. So that's why asammoha, no confusion, the ability to see into things properly. Kshama means forgiveness, forbearance, or divine quality. Truth, holding fast to truth, the ideal of truth. That's again a divine quality. Great political leaders, Gandhi or Lincoln, you find many of these people. They were not sitting in a hermitage or sitting under a tree like Buddha meditating, not necessarily. They were quite in the midst of the world of agitations, political activities, but still they had some higher idealism, a sense of discerning wisdom. So you can see that, see how Lord Krishna is explaining all this. So if you look around, you can see the presence of the Lord everywhere. Only we should be able to look from a proper perspective. Then you can see. There is nowhere where the Lord is, the divine is not present. This is a higher philosophy. So again, Dhamma. Dhamma actually means the ability to restrain the senses, external senses. Our eyes and ears and the sense of touch and sense of smell all go in different directions. We are intelligent, we have a lot of knowledge, a lot of power, but at the same time we have the ability to restrain the movement of our eyes and ears and our senses of action, senses of actions and senses of perception. That higher wisdom is an indication of the fact that the divine is present there. So that's why Lord Krishna is explaining these 20 different characteristics of the divine. Shama. Shama, again, it is restraining the ability to control, to exercise control on the activities of our thoughts and mind. That is called Shama. So Dhamma and Shama both go together. Dhamma means the ability to restrain in what direction our senses drag us. And Shama means the ability to control, restrain our thoughts and emotions and feelings, which actually can create havoc if we are not able to restrain. So that is Shama. And then Sukham. Sukham actually means, happiness. Happiness of a person who is happy with something sublime. If there is the ability to appreciate, to feel joy when something good happens to us and also to others. So this is a sign of the presence of the divine. So it's interesting. And again, dukkha, misery, or feeling a kind of inner grief when something unpleasant happens to somebody. That is also the presence of the divine. In other words, if we look around with our eyes and with our mind and observe our own mind and observe life around, you can see the divine manifesting in so many different ways. So, that's why Lord Krishna is giving this list of 20 characteristics. And in birth and death, that also is a mystery from where a person suddenly a new life emerges and that life vanishes. Into one of the mysteries discussed in the Mahabharata, there's an interesting dialogue between a crane, some sort of a divine celestial being, not God or anybody, maybe an angel, let us say, Yaksha Prasna it is called. Questions put to Yudhishthira, who is a philosopher king of Mahabharata tradition. This angel is asking some questions to this king, who is a philosopher, who is a wise man. And what is the most wonderful, most mysterious, most indescribable thing in the world and in life? That's the question. The answer given is something interesting. Every day, every moment, so many human beings, insects, animals, they disappear. They die and disappear. Still, we think we can live till eternity. In fact, this is a reality. A person who is managing a crematorium, he is not always remembering the fact that one day it could happen to him. Or a doctor who is treating hospice patients. It is a physical reality that he knows very well. But we don't always remember. In fact, we can remember the reality of death, which is so obvious to everyone, then we become wiser than what we are. Because the fact that what we normally value in material life cannot exist for too long, they are not eternal, that realization can help us to think wisely, live with greater wisdom, can create this sense of self-restraint of senses and mind. It can make us think of higher things. It can make us philosophers. It doesn't happen. So Yudhishthira says, the king says, ahanya bhudani gachantiha Himalayam. So that's every day, every minute, Yudhishthira says, so many people, insects, animals, there's not 1 minute or maybe not 1 day when somebody or something, some animal, some insect doesn't die. And we know that, but we don't remember that. That is the greatest wonder. That is Yudhishthira's answer. So, that's why birth and death both are reminders of the presence of the divine. Fear also. Fear actually is due to the forgetfulness of this fact. And also fearlessness. Abhayam means the ability to go beyond fear. So you can find both positive and negative are equally manifestations of the divine. If somebody who is living in a thick forest in extreme winter, in December, January, who starts a fire to save from cold, that fire is a great help, is blessing. But this great fire that raged through California last year, it was not a blessing. So, but both are the same fire. Both are manifestations of the same entity. So that's what Lord Krishna says. Then ahimsa, non-injury, ahimsa, non-violence, in word, in deed, and thought. That is also a manifestation of the divine. Then a kind of even-mindedness, equilibrium of mind. Mind always remain steady without being agitated, without being too much excited, too happy or too unhappy. That is samatha, means even-mindedness. And then tushti means contentment. That's the greatest wealth. It happens only to those who have this ability to understand everything that we need, all the great things, wealth, health, all these things are important, but also the limitation of all these. So when you understand the limitation of what we normally aspire for, then it can keep our mind in a state of calmness, quietude, and that gives us tushti. Tushti means santosha. Santosha means contentment. Contentment is a great virtue. It's not happiness. It is not satisfaction. Satisfaction is only a temporary feeling. But contentment is actually a state of our mind. It actually is linked to a higher philosophy, a higher view of life and existence. That contentment. So if a person has got contentment, then many of these qualities can naturally emerge. Tapaha. Tapaha means austerity. Tapa can also be interpreted as self-imposed poverty. I mean, the ability to restrain oneself, the ability to restrain one's aspirations and desires, not because you are forced to do that, but because you realize the need for contentment, and you realize the need for practicing this austerity if you want contentment. So that is called tapah, dhanam, benevolence, generosity. To what we have more than enough, the willingness to part with that to help somebody else, the ability. It needs a lot of detachment, and also it needs the wisdom to know that all these material things that we aspire for cannot give us permanent contentment. So from that comes this generosity, dhanam. Dhanam means. So dhanam, yashaha, ayashaha means good name, reputation, a great name, and also its opposite, because it is the absence of proper endeavor to realize the divine within us that leads to the opposite qualities. Bhavanti bhava bhudana matta eva prithagvitaha. These are all different manifestations that emerge from the same reality, the divine. This is in short, this is the meaning of this verse. Shankaracharya, the great commentator, he has expressed his own interesting views. So he says, for example, buddhihi antakaranasya sukshma yarthavodhana samarthyam tadvandam buddhiman itihi vadanti. So Shankaracharya says, the real wisdom, the real understanding is the result of purity in mind, when our emotions and feelings are refined through practicing self-restraint, contentment, absence of greed, absence of violence called ahimsa. Then our mind develops a special ability to look deep into things. Sukshma avadharana means the ability to understand the subtlety or subtle nature of things in this world. That's an important thing. So when our mind also goes through this process of evolution. It's a fact, mind, our intellectual faculties also go through this process of evolution. You might have heard about children prodigies who you can find many of them they display prodigious qualities of memory, retention. Many of these faculties, people who can remember the capitals, small children frequently, they can remember the capitals of so many countries, and they remember many things. But they don't, all of them do not become men like Socrates or Plato, Aristotle, or Buddha. So that means pure intellect, sharpness of intellect, is not enough to understand the higher meaning, the higher implications of life. Because study of life, understanding the subtle nature of life, requires something much more than mere intellectual power. The most intelligent, the most intellectual persons in the world are not necessarily the wisest. One can be extremely intelligent and absolutely foolish. This could happen. In the sense, absolutely thoughtless. On the other hand, you find people who are not necessarily very well educated, not necessarily with so many education qualifications, but they have an ability to see into things. You can see the examples in both Eastern tradition or Western tradition. Buddha, many others. Indian tradition you find in Marcus Aurelius in the history of Western civilization, in a great Roman emperor. You can find many. The ancient Greek tradition you find. People who are not necessarily intellectuals in the classical sense of the term, but they could understand certain aspects of human life that made them really wise. The Y is meant capital letter W. So what's the source of that wisdom? Lord Krishna says that wisdom is a manifestation of the divine. So pure intellectual ability or power of retention, not necessarily the manifestation of the divine. Along with that, the ability to see deep into things. That is Shankaracharya. Sukshma, the avadharana samarthya means, sukshma means subtle. Avadharana means understanding. Samarthya means efficiency or proficiency. So that's how Lord Krishna describes the presence of the divine everywhere. If we open our eyes and observe, we can see the divine manifesting in so many different ways. That is, Vibhutis means the manifestation of the powers of the divine. After that, the sixth verse is it's something linked to Indian mythology, Indian cosmology. So the meaning is Mahashraya Saptapurve Chatvaro Manavastatha Madbhava Manasa Jata Yesham Loka Ima Praja. The 7 great rishis as well as 4 ancient Manus possessed of powers like they have their mind fixed on the divine, and they were born of my mind, and all the creatures in the world emerge from them. This is the meaning. I shall try to explain this. So, first of all, there is a reference to 7 rishis. In the Hindu mythology, you can find the 7 rishis. Those who are familiar with this, Marichi, Atri, Bhrigu, Vasishtha, Pulaha, Pulastya and Kratu. These are the 6 sages mentioned in the Hindu Puranas, and Shankaracharya refers to that in the Gita's commentary, and elsewhere you find this. It's called Sapta Rishi. Rishi means a sage or saint. Rishi actually means somebody who can see far into things and deep into things. This Sukshma Avadharana means the ability to see the subtle reality behind what appears on the surface. That again is a sign of wisdom. So according to Hindu mythology, there were 7 sages in ancient times. And the names are Marichi, Atri, Bhrigu, Vasishtha, Pulaha, Pulastya and Kratu. These are 7 sages. who had lived in ancient times. And they also are connected to the most ancient of Hindu scriptures called Rigveda Samhita, which has got 10 mandalas, and these sages are linked to 7 of the 10 mandalas. That's one interpretation. So that they are called Prajapatis. They are the great ancestors of humanity. That's how it is. They are the great ancestors of humanity. More or less like you find in Old Testament, you find many things you can find in Hindu Puranas. Different way. But there in Hindu Puranas you find they are all designated as Rishi. So the typical Rishi image brings to our mind the image of a person, more or less very old, with a long beard, sitting in meditation, who can see deep into things, into human life, the mystery of everything, who is a symbol of wisdom, restraint, self-restraint, knowledge, compassion. This is the image of Sapta Rishis. And then there is a reference to Manus. So you can find Mahashaya Saptapuru Sapta. Mahashaya Sapta means 7 sages, Sapta Rishi, called Saptarshi it's called. And according to our tradition, Swami Vivekananda is supposed to be an incarnation of one of the 7 sages. That is, you can find Swami Vivekananda again. After all, if you look at the life of a great man within a very short lifespan, he shows so much of wisdom, so much of maturity, so much of this transcendental spiritual perspective, knowledge and wisdom and self-restraint, a compassion for the whole humanity, an ability to look beyond the limitations of barriers of race, culture, language, and so on, looking at the whole humanity as one spiritual family, is a sign of Rishi. And then there is a reference to 14 ancient ancestors. So you find, of course, 14 are not mentioned. Chatvaro Manavahasata. Actually, there are 14 of these ancient ancestors. They are called Manu. Swayambhuva Manu, Swarojisha, Uttama, Tamasa, Raivada, Chakshusha, Vaivaswada, Savarni, Daksha Savarni, Brahma Savarni, Dharma Savarni, Rudra Savarni, Rauchideva Savarni, and Indra Savarni. Anyway, don't worry about these, all mentioned in different Puranas. Just by context I mentioned that's all. 14 Manus. You can see the 14 great ancestors mentioned in the Puranas. But here in this particular verse, if you read later in the 6th verse, Chatvaro Manava, I mean 4 great ancestors' names are mentioned. According to many commentators, they are Sanaka, Sanantana, Sanatana, Sanat Kumara, the 4 great wise sages of ancient times. And according to the followers of Vaishnava tradition, Ramanuja and others, called Vasudeva, Sankarsana, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha. Anyway, this 6th verse is a reference to Hindu cosmology, the ancient histories of Indian culture and civilization. What the meaning is simple. What Lord Krishna says is, all the great ancestors and great sages of ancient times, they also got their wisdom from me. I mean, the same electricity manifests in these 7 sages as great wisdom, knowledge, and compassion, all these spiritual qualities. So that is an important verse. Now you can ask questions, you are most welcome. Some of these verses may be linked to ancient mythology, but some of the other verses are very, very important. They have a deep message for our own life in modern times. Okay, you are most welcome. If you have questions, most welcome.
Namaskar, Maharaj.
Namaskar.
You Is there good and evil, like objectively in the world, or do we just perceive good and evil because of the state of our mind?
Yeah, that's true. But then, there are certain things which can never be designated as good. That's the person who possesses certain qualities that we call evil qualities may defend his evil characteristics, can write books about that, about his characteristics. But still, because they do so much of harm to the rest of humanity, so there is no other way to characterize them. But the important point here is, it is our mind that eventually becomes good or bad. And then, the evil is not a separate category from good, separate from good. Because if you want to put all the evil in one basket and all the good in another basket, then you have to bring in a Satan or a devil. It's a kind of, anthropomorphization. You make everything anthropomorphic, giving a personal dimension. So anthropomorphism is not rejected in Vedanta, but Vedanta says if you evolve to a higher level in spiritual life, then you go beyond anthropomorphism of the evil. Because then you find you don't believe in the doctrine of evil, you believe in the doctrine of error. So Vedanta doesn't accept the doctrine of evil, it interprets the evil as the doctrine of error. Now remember, this is only the Vedantic perspective. There are other Hindu philosophical systems like the Vaishnava, Ramanuja, Madhva and so on, which very clearly distinguish, they have some kind of equivalent to the devil as a separate category. So because they don't believe in Advaita. Only from Advaitic perspective, evil as a separate fundamental category is not acceptable. That is the approach of Vedantic theology, Advaita Vedanta theology. But Ramanuja, Madhva and other systems, it more or less like the Abrahamic religious traditions. That's true. So, okay, yeah.
Sorry, just to namaste. Just to clarify this last point, you said Advaita does not recognize evil; it recognizes the other.
Error. You do something wrong because you don't realize that divine present in you. So it is your ignorance, the error. You interpret yourself to be a physical being. Then life is nothing more than just an opportunity to enjoy. So whatever you do to satisfy your desires is justified on that ground. This is the approach of many of the evil personalities that you come across in Hindu Puranas, Hindu mythologies. Ravana, many other demons, demoniacal qualities. The 16th chapter will deal with that. So the point is, Vedanta says the same divine is present everywhere, just like electricity. Without the presence of something that activates your emotions and feelings, even an evil man cannot function. But that evil man's mind should be changed. Good qualities, good samskaras, good intentions, good emotion, then he'll become a good person. So this idea, that's the idea behind. Yeah.
How do you build the ability to perceive things the way they are versus getting deluded or carried away by your emotions?
Yeah. Of course, there are different ways. One way is to take an interest in these higher thoughts and ideas. At least an intellectual interest itself can go some distance in helping you to develop this discerning wisdom. Another thing is called some kind of higher ideal in life. Some higher ideal. And that will help us to orient, to organize, to focus our energies and actions in one direction. So that also will give us the ability to see deeper into things. So, when we have a higher ideal in life, that helps us to keep in our mind one central focus. So our energies and thoughts and all our intellectual, mental, physical activities will be directed in one direction, and that will organize, that will put in a set of discipline in our own activities and thoughts and emotions. And that will give us the ability to see deeper into things and to make sense of what things really are. Yeah.
Good evening, Swamiji. To go off of that, the other previous two questions of the doctrine of error versus evil, you're saying that because we have this ignorance. Is there a cosmic reason why we have ignorance in the first place? Is it to give us free will, or what's Vedanta's view on that?
Yeah. Very often the constitution of our mind is formed by samskaras, vrittis, samskaras. If you attend Yoga Sutra classes, the ongoing Yoga Sutra class, you may listen many times. Vrittis and samskaras. Whatever we do, not physical actions alone, our thoughts in action. Thought is an action. Whatever we do mentally, physically, verbally, it creates, it registers an impact on the mental system. A tendency is created. So you can imagine a person who goes on doing good things, slowly his mind also evolves. Even people who do good things with a selfish motive, even they will evolve in spiritual life. But it's better to do something good with a selfish motive than never doing anything good at any time. So that means actions have a direct effect on the constitution of mind, on impressions. So constantly engaging in some good actions is one way to change the structure of the constitution of our mind. It can generate spiritual energy, spiritual tendencies, spiritual emotions, spiritual samskaras, and that will refine our mind. So once that happens, your ability to do right things, your aversion to do something that is really not good, you feel a kind of aversion towards doing something. We often find this happening. At some stage, we feel a kind of total aversion to certain things which we know to be bad. Our mind actually begins to move or evolve in another direction. So that's because of the good thoughts and good actions we have done. So whatever we do actually will have a definite effect on our mind. Mind and physical actions cannot be separated. So when this happens, you generate spiritual energy. And then ignorance or the tendency to do unpleasant things, which we call it evil, can be reversed and can be neutralized. And good samskaras will begin to emerge. This idea behind.
So I understand that you're saying it's important to sublimate or refine these samskaras, but what I'm asking is, we also have the tendency with samskaras to be evil or negative. What I'm saying, is there a reason for that? Is it to give us free will, or is it? That's what I'm asking.
Free will is there, but it is not so free, not as free as we often imagine. We don't have complete freedom on what we want to do. You often feel people who have lot of good intentions, sincere intention to do something wonderful. When they try to do something in their own mind, prevents them from doing. There's always a great conflict going on between what we want to do and what we eventually end up doing. what our mind actually permits us to do. Dostoevsky in Brothers of Karamazov, he talks about the natural human tendency to go for what is bad for us. And he, in a humorous way, he says, what right God has to force us to do only what is good for us? Why can't we do what is bad for us? It's a very revolting argument. That's sort of man Dostoevsky was. So really speaking, he was not joking. There's a fact. There is a natural tendency in many people to enjoy doing bad, to enjoy doing wrong things. They know it is wrong, they know it will bring them misery, but they cannot stop, they cannot prevent themselves from doing that. This is an important thing. So are we free? We are not free. We cannot do all that we want to do, because there is something in us that actually stops us from doing what we actually want to do. Some of the most wonderful persons, we take a decision tomorrow and we will meditate. But the time comes, of course, if there is a meditation session, we pay $500 per 1 week session, then we may do that. That's true. There's another compelling factor behind. But there again, there is not free will. We don't want to waste money, $500 you pay every week, and then we don't want to waste money by not meditating. That's what we are paid for. But suppose you have total freedom to not meditate, not to meditate, still you want to do, meditation is very good, you really sincerely want, but frequently at the beginning phase, your mind doesn't permit you to meditate. You sit there, you try to do, immediately you want to get away from it and do something that you have been doing. So what our mind allows us to do and what we actually sincerely want to do, there's a big conflict. But this conflict can be resolved. That's what Vedanta says. So there comes the role of karma yoga. Suppose a person, to give an example, a hypothetical example, he's trying to meditate or he's trying to do something good, but he cannot because he's different. He's a slave of different kind of habits. Okay. And then he tries, his mind doesn't allow him. But if he makes constant effort, then the resistance will slowly wear down. It will disappear. He will be able to do. Because constant efforts generates positive spiritual energy. So that helps you to break down the resistance and eventually you start meditating. And this is true for all good actions, all good things. That means we are not actually as free as we often imagine. It's a fact. We are spiritual people, spiritual seekers who try to do practice some spiritual disciplines will realize this problem. Our mind doesn't permit us to do what we actually sincerely want to do. So how free are we? That's a big question. But we can be free. We can unshackle. We can get ourselves out of this prison of our own samskaras by forcibly doing something good. Some kind of engaging in some kind of physical activity will help us to generate spiritual samskaras. There's something very interesting. Physical activity can generate spiritual samskaras, spiritual tendencies. It's an important thing. A physical activity is something that we can do more easily. Our mind may not permit us to meditate. But if we want to go and clean, let's say the church, which is fully dirty, we have to clean up the place, there our mind may not be very cooperative, but still at the physical level we can break through these obstacles, we can do that. And if you do that for some days, your mind actually generates spiritual energies. Then mind also slowly begins to cooperate with you when you try to meditate. It's an important thing. That's why Patanjali in his sadhana pada, the first sutra, tapaswadhyaya ishara pranidhanani kriya yoga. The commentators like Vijnana Bhikshu and others, they include karma yoga, bhakti yoga, all these traditional spiritual disciplines are included in kriya yoga category. It's actually alien to Patanjali system, but he says if you do some spiritual disciplines, do some good physical activities, that can generate a store of spiritual samskaras, spiritual tendencies. That's what it is. So, this is an important thing to remember. So, I think, please excuse me, we have already finished the end of time. So, we'll continue discussion of the same verse. You're most welcome to continue asking questions, the same questions. We couldn't finish the discussion today, next Friday. Most welcome.
Swami, there are few questions in YouTube, Swamiji.
Oh, please repeat those questions. Yeah.
So, from Yogesh Agarwal,
Ah.
if everything is manifestation of divine,
Yeah.
good and bad,
Yeah.
why does Lord Krishna only list 20 qualities?
Oh yeah, actually this is a text. He can go on giving a much longer list, but I think if I get enough time to explain this, one way or other, all these can be linked to all conceivable human traits and tendencies. That's why, yasha and ayasha means good reputation and also its opposite. Fear and fearlessness. So, all these are, by implication, all other qualities are mentioned through implication.
There is one more last question from devotee David.
Yeah.
Which come first, ignorance or ego?
Yeah, actually, ignorance. No, ignorance is the source of all other problems. Ignorance. Again, ignorance should not be understood to be just absence of intellectual information or knowledge. It is something which goes beyond that. We can explain it in the next session. Okay? Thank you. Thank you for the questions. I have some announcements. Temples are reopening. We are happy to inform all of you that we are now reopening the temple for in-person programs, and we will have Sunday lectures, Sunday, February 6th, service as a spiritual quality. Sunday, February 13th, evolution of Advaita, part 1. Sunday, February 20, evolution of Advaita, part 2. And in spiritual qualities, same-sightedness, on February 27th. And you are most welcome to attend these programs in person at the new temple, 2323 Velour Street, San Francisco. And of course, our Bhagavad Gita classes, as you know, which already we have reopened. Yoga Sutra classes will continue to be held online every Sunday at 6 o'clock. We have these Yoga Sutra classes, which are hosted by the Stanford Hindu Students Association. We will continue holding Yoga Sutra classes on every Sunday, 6 p.m. in the evening. Thank you. Namaskar. Next class, Yoga Sutra class, will be this coming Sunday, that is 6th February at 6 p.m. in the evening. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Rama Krishna Arpanamastu.